1997 saw the release of hit films such as Titanic, Good Will Hunting, Donnie Brasco, The Fifth Element, Starship Troopers, As Good as It Gets, Austin Powers, Jackie Brown, Men in Black, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Lost Highway, Batman and Robin, and LA Confidential. In music, we saw the release of great albums such as OK Computer by Radiohead, The Fat of the Land by The Prodigy, The Color and the Shape by The Foo Fighters, Life After Death by Notorious B.I.G., Album of the Year by Faith No More, The Art of War by Bone Thugs and Harmony, No Way Out by Puff Daddy and the Family, Nimrod by Green Day, Wu-Tang Forever by the Wu-Tang Clan, and Around the Fur by the Deftones. On television, we saw the debuts of King of the Hill, South Park, Oz, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Just Shoot Me, Daria, Todd McFarlane's Spawn, Johnny Bravo, Behind the Music, Ally McBeal, Dharma and Greg, and Bear in the Big Blue House. But all this paled in comparison to what was happening in Extreme Championship Wrestling. Moving on from various controversies, the Underdog promotion prepared for its biggest venture yet, pay-per-view. The company continued to innovate the wrestling business with captivating storylines that blurred the lines of reality. By mid-year, ECW found itself involved in a multi-promotion war that only added to their outlaw image. Join us on this trip as we journey back to ECW in 1997, Part 1. The January 2nd edition of ECW TV featured footage of the Eliminators defeating the Gangstas to become the new ECW Tag Team Champions. Following the match, the Gangstas handed the belts over to the new champions, shaking their hands before leaving the ring. Soaked in blood, Perry Saturn and John Kronus celebrated their big win. Raven successfully defended the ECW World Heavyweight Championship against Mikey Whipwreck. The Sandman attacked Raven following the match, only for Raven to spike him with an even flow. Laurie Fullington began to cane Sandman repeatedly, with Mikey making the save. This caused Raven to clobber Mikey with the belt, even flowing Sandman onto the title soon after. Raven snapped the Singapore cane over his knee, with Sandman striking with a DDT. Sandman tossed aside the remnants of the Singapore cane and left with the ECW World Heavyweight Championship in hand. The January 7th edition of ECW TV featured footage from Webster Town Hall and saw primetime Brian Lee attack Killer Kowalski backstage. Lee looked into the camera and addressed Terry Funk, saying he'd better stay away from the Legend Killer. In the main event, Raven called out the Sandman, who'd stolen his ECW World Heavyweight Championship. Raven taunted Sandman, saying he was a better father and a better lover to the Sandman's family. This brought out the Sandman, who dragged the belt to the ring with him. The two beat one another bloody and battered each other through the building. Raven suplexed Sandman on top of the merchandise table and then dropped the table on top of him. They battered one another up flights of stairs and through the town hall. At one point, they even brawled into the BWO locker room, where Raven shoved his former lackey, Stevie Richards. The Sandman exited the BWO locker room in a BWO shirt, which only fueled Raven to pummel him more as they made their way back to the ring. Both men clobbered one another, bloody and exhausted, as the show went off the air. On the January 14th episode of ECW TV, wrestling legends Wildfire Tommy Rich and Ricky Morton made their ECW debuts. Their opponents were the weapon-wielding Gangstas, who initiated them in extreme fashion. In the end, New Jack dove off the top rope with a steel chair, smashing it over Rich's skull and scoring the pinfall victory. Following the bout, Rich and Morton argued, leading to a bloody impromptu bout between the two. Rich scored the victory, rolling up Morton for a 3 count. ECW World Champion Raven came to the ring and demanded that the Sandman return his belt. Out came Sandman with the championship, with the two slugging it out in the middle of the ring. They took the fight to the floor, where Sandman tossed a table at Raven. The momentum shifted back to Raven, who clotheslined Sandman over the top rope and threw a table. Just as Raven hit Sandman with an even flow, the BWO made their way to the ring. Sandman spit beer into Raven's eyes, blinding him. With his vision impaired, Raven swung violently, unknowingly knocking out the Blue Meanie and Nova. Stevie Richards tried to calm Raven down, only for the champion to shove him. This caused Richards to shove Raven right into a roll-up by Sandman. An angry Raven got in Richards' face, causing Richards to lunge at him with a Stevie kick. Raven dodged it, with Sandman tasting the boot. Raven turned his attention back to Sandman, only for Richards to whip him back around, saying, "I'm not finished with you yet." The two began to throw punches, battering each other. Sandman whipped Raven around and then drilled him with a DDT. Richards tried to recruit Sandman into the BWO, only for Raven to return to his feet. This caused Richards to level Raven with a Stevie kick. Richards handed Sandman the BWO shirt off his back before exiting. Sandman used the shirt to choke Raven. He followed it up by caning Raven bloody, cracking open a beer, and leaving with the ECW Championship. Raven was left alone in the ring, bloody and beaten. Refusing medical attention, Raven crawled up the aisle on his own accord. Joey Styles attempted to continue the show until Raven interrupted. Raven grabbed Styles by the tie, demanding that he go to the locker room and get him his ECW Championship from the Sandman. Commissioner Todd Gordon stepped in, telling Raven to be a champion and get the belt back himself. Frustrated, Raven shoved Gordon out of the frame. The January 21st episode of ECW TV began with the franchise Shane Douglas, Chris Candido, and primetime Brian Lee atop the Eagle's Nest. Lee beat Dreamer mercilessly with a garbage can. Douglas followed it up by hitting Dreamer with a single-arm DDT onto the trash can. Candido finished the work, tossing Dreamer off the stage and onto the concrete floor below. As medics attended to a bloody Dreamer, Terry Funk made his way to the scene. Irate, he heaved a chair at the triple threat, before helping Dreamer onto a stretcher. As Dreamer was stretchered away, Wildfire Tommy Rich attacked Funk with a steel chair. Rich tipped the stretcher over and stomped on a helpless Dreamer before getting in a few more shots on Funk. Joey Styles reshot the opening introduction and introduced his guest, Taz. Bill Alfonso led the way, blowing his whistle obnoxiously. Taz promptly stole the microphone from Styles and addressed the fans, who chanted for Sabu. Taz told them to keep cheering since Sabu was in Japan. He went on to say he's just waiting for Paul E. Dangerously to draw up the contract for a match with Sabu and he'll sign it. Shane Douglas and Francine came to the ring, interrupting a match between Pitbull No. 2 and Bubba Ray Dudley. Douglas announced that he was doubling his bounty for the head of Pitbull No. 2. Numerous members of the locker room ran out to try, but Pitbull No. 2 fought everyone off, with Bubba Ray by his side. Just when Douglas said he'd do it himself, Brian Lee and Chris Candido ambushed Pitbull No. 2 and Bubba. Lee chokeslammed Pitbull No. 2 over the top rope, sending him crashing through a table. Terry Funk battled Brian Lee, immediately taking the fight into the front row. A messy brawl ensued, with Lee bloodying Funk early and dominating the bout. Just when Funk was gaining the advantage, Shane Douglas and Chris Candido attacked. This allowed Lee to chokeslam Funk over the top rope and through a table. This was enough for Lee to score the pinfall victory. Following the bout, Lee continued to provoke Funk, who lashed out. Douglas and Candido raced back to the ring and stomped on Funk before kicking him to the floor. Shane Douglas stood in the ring with Francine, saying that since he beat up Tommy Dreamer earlier, he doesn't have an opponent for the night. Out came a masked man with a voice eerily similar to Ravishing Rick Rude. He said, "It's a new year, Shane Douglas, and my new year resolves to change the direction of ECW." The masked man stated his intentions to screw with the franchise. He said he had somebody backstage that was ready to face Douglas. White Zombie's Thunderkiss 65 hit, and Pitbull No. 1 made his shocking return. The fans erupted as Pitbull No. 1 tossed Douglas around with ease as the show came to a close. The January 28th edition of ECW TV saw Terry Funk cut a promo about the beatdown he received last week. He praised Tommy Dreamer for his dedication and even compared him to Dory Funk Sr. Funk talked about his father Dory wanting to be a champion, but died of a heart attack before he could make that happen. Funk said that 24 years later, his career is at a crossroads. He revealed his intentions to challenge Raven for the ECW World Heavyweight Championship, looking to fulfill the dreams of his father. Funk began to cry, saying that if he were to win the championship, he'd want the fans to join him in saying, "We did it our way." He said not like the WWF, WCW, New Japan, All Japan, FMW, or Ultimate Fighting. Funk referred to it as the ECW way. He said, "It's the most physical, dangerous form of wrestling in the world today, bar none. Funk said, "We did it our way because we love it that way." He closed by sitting back in his chair, choked up. Taz appeared from his dojo, discussing an old shoulder injury that won't affect him in an upcoming showdown with Sabu. He went on to discuss how much he despises Rob Van Dam and his use of chairs. He said, "I don't need a weapon. My hands are my weapons." Taz closed by issuing a warning that he was coming for Sabu. Raven cut a promo from the locker room, discussing his disgust for Stevie Richards. Later, Raven defended the ECW World Heavyweight Championship against the Sandman. Laurie Fullington accompanied Raven while the Sandman made his entrance wearing Raven's title. Raven ambushed Sandman during his entrance, clobbering him repeatedly with a Singapore cane. After heaving the timekeeper's table into the ring, Raven prepared to send Sandman crashing through it. Sandman reversed an Irish whip and sent Raven crashing into the table. The Sandman drank a beer and then tossed a table over the top rope and onto Raven on the floor. Raven battled back, Irish whipping Sandman through a table set up against a guardrail. They battled back in the ring, where Sandman DDT'd Raven onto the ECW Championship. Sandman made the cover, with Laurie breaking the pinfall at 2. The Sandman got his hands on her, ripping off her dress. This revealed that Laurie was wearing a BWO shirt. After caning Sandman over the head, Raven scolded Laurie. The BWO made their way to the ring, with Stevie Richards confronting Raven. Raven had none of it, slugging Richards in the face. Richards nailed Raven with a Stevie kick, only for Raven to fall on top of Sandman and score a pinfall victory. The show closed with the Triple Threat laying a beatdown on the Pitbulls. Pitbull number 1 complained that his neck had been broken again. The Masked Man rushed to the ring, telling Shane Douglas that if he gave up Francine, he'd spare himself a beatdown. As Francine seduced the Masked Man, the Gladiator Mike Awesome snuck in from behind. The Masked Man dodged the attack and nailed Awesome with a rude awakening. Crossing the Line Again took place on February 1st at the ECW Arena. The show began with Paul E. Dangerously standing in the ring with members of the ECW roster. He announced that on Sunday, April 13th, Taz would face Sabu in the main event of the first ever ECW pay-per-view in an emotional promo. Dangerously thanked the fans for their persistence in helping them make it to the big time. The night saw Big Stevie Cool defeat Ricky Morton. Later, Raven defended his ECW World Championship against Dr. Death Steve Williams in a bloodbath. Stevie Richards led the BWO to confront Raven, with Laurie and Tyler Fullington decked out in BWO garb. Richards offered Williams a BWO shirt, which Dr. Death ripped in half. It took 3 Stevie kicks to put Williams down. Ever the opportunist, Raven nailed Dr. Death with an even flow and scored the pinfall victory. The Sandman battled Devon Dudley, with Bubba waffling Sandman with a chair and turning on little brother Spike. Bubba and Devon officially formed their legendary alliance and nailed Spike with a Dudley death drop. The Dudley Boys began to cane and clobber Sandman with a chair. The gangsters raced to the scene with trash cans full of weapons. After initially having the advantage, the gangsters felt the wrath of the half-brothers from Dudleyville. The Eliminators defended the ECW Tag Team Championships against Sabu and Rob Van Dam. They broke out multiple tables and a ladder in a violent bout that saw the Eliminators hit Rob Van Dam with total elimination to score a pinfall victory. Following the bout, the Eliminators hit Sabu with total elimination. Taz marched to the ring and assaulted RVD with a chair before locking him in a Taz mission. Taz yelled into a microphone, "This is you, Sabu." The Eliminators held up Sabu with Taz approaching. Sabu spit at Taz, causing the Eliminators to hit Sabu with another total elimination. Taz said he'd see Sabu at the pay-per-view. In a battle of former NWA World Heavyweight Champions, Terry Funk battled Wildfire Tommy Rich. The match started with a wild brawl in the crowd, with Rich bleeding within the first minute. They brawled back to the ring, where Funk continued to slug it out with a bloody Rich. It wasn't long before Rich gained control and attacked referee Jim Molyneux for good measure. Funk's face was bloodied, with Rich also targeting his knee. They traded punches on the canvas until Rich added insult to injury by slapping on a spinning toe hold. Funk fought out of it and locked in his signature spinning toe hold to score a submission victory. The main event saw the Triple Threat battle the Pitbulls and Tommy Dreamer. At one point, the Triple Threat hit their opponents with a triple Rude Awakening. This brought out the Masked Man, who incited a wild scene. The Masked Man spanked Francine, while Pitbull number 2 super-bombed Pitbull number 1 onto Shane Douglas through a table. Despite scoring the pinfall victory, Pitbull number 1 was stretchered out of the arena. Terry Funk cut a promo on the February 11th edition of ECW TV, telling the story of a bull rider named Freckles Brown. One day, Freckles lasted 8 seconds on a mighty bull. When asked afterward how he did it, Freckles said, "Every dog has his day." Funk pointed to himself and said, "This dog wants to have his day." He talked about wanting to give his wife and daughters the memory of seeing him become the ECW World Heavyweight Champion. Later, ECW World Heavyweight Champion Raven responded, saying that every dog doesn't have his day. Raven said that there's no way Funk can beat him. The chance for ECW couldn't be ignored on the February 17th edition of WWF Monday Night Raw. Jerry the King Lawler confiscated a pro-ECW sign and referred to the company as extremely crappy wrestling. Lawler went on to challenge the ECW wrestlers to come to next week's episode of Raw. Later in the broadcast, Paul E. Dangerously called in during a match between Owen Hart and Flash Funk. Dangerously accepted Lawler's challenge and said ECW would be live on next week's Raw. The February 18th episode of ECW TV began with Raven cutting a promo from a stairwell. Raven instigated Tommy Dreamer, saying he can never win the big one. He then insulted Terry Funk, calling him too old to be champion. Raven said, "You're so old, you could be my father. I hated my father." He then said, "It isn't enough that I want to hurt you. I want to end you." Raven said he'd be thinking of all the abuse his father put him through when he's in the ring with Funk. He refocused his anger toward the Sandman, saying he can never take the ECW championship from him. Raven continued his pity party, saying Stevie Richards left him to go become a man. He said he'd give Richards one last chance to come back, and everything would be forgiven. A promo aired from Japan featuring Michinoku Pro Wrestling talents The Great Sasuke, Gran Hamada, and Gran Naniwa. Sasuke praised ECW and its new partnership with Michinoku Pro. Later, Michinoku Pro talents Taka Michinoku, Dick Togo, and Men's Teo cut a promo from Japan. They were interrupted by the BWO, with Stevie Richards saying they were looking to expand to Japan. Richards christened them as the International Blue World Order. Michinoku, Togo, and Teo put on the shirts and celebrated with their new BWO teammates. Fan cam footage aired of Taz attacking Rob Van Dam at a house show. Sabu ran in for the save, leading to a pull-apart brawl with Taz. The locker room emptied to separate the two. CyberSlam 97 took place on February 22nd and began with ECW Tag Team Champions The Eliminators battling Rob Van Dam and Sabu. It was another hard-hitting battle between the two teams who made great use of tables, ladders, and chairs. In the end, the Eliminators nailed RVD twice with total elimination and scored the pinfall victory. The Eliminators shook the hand of Sabu following the match, but RVD wanted none of it. Sabu got upset, urging RVD to shake hands with the champions. Instead, the arrogant RVD made his exit. Terry Funk and Tommy Dreamer teamed to face the ECW World Heavyweight Champion Raven and Primetime Brian Lee. If Funk or Dreamer managed to score the victory, they'd receive a title shot at the pay-per-view. Since Dreamer had never pinned Raven, the champion laid down in the middle of the ring. Raven made Dreamer choose, score the pinfall he's been chasing for years, but in turn, crush his mentor's hopes and dreams. Dreamer refused, and instead attacked Raven to kick off a wild brawl. It wasn't long before the action got out of hand and spilled into the crowd. Funk clobbered Raven repeatedly with a chair, busting him open. Back in the ring, Funk locked Raven in a spinning toe hold and made him submit. Unfortunately, referee Jim Molyneux was preoccupied with Dreamer and Lee. Moments later, Lee entered the ring and repeatedly clobbered Funk with a trash can to break the hold. With blood pouring from his ear, Funk attempted to crawl to his feet to continue fighting. Dreamer threw himself on top of Funk, begging him to stay down. Sensing his title shot slipping through his fingers, the stubborn Funk attempted to continue fighting. Paramedics attended to Funk, with Dreamer forcing him onto a stretcher. Stevie Richards raced to the ring with Laurie and Tyler Fullington in tow. Raven begged for the Stevie kick, with Richards tuning up the band. Before Richards could connect, he fell victim to a primetime slam. Laurie entered the ring and slapped Raven, only for the champion to drill her with an even flow DDT. Tyler raced to the locker room and returned with a bloody Dreamer. Lee made quick work of Dreamer, with Tyler again racing to the locker room. Tyler returned atop the shoulders of his father. Sandman cracked open a beer, smashed it over his head, and went into battle equipped with his Singapore cane. After cleaning house, Sandman covered Raven and scored the pinfall victory, seemingly becoming the #1 contender. Sandman embraced his son, threw his BWO shirt into the crowd, and carried Tyler away. Back in the ring, Dreamer shook hands with Richards, with a tense stare-down ensuing. The main event pit Sabu against Chris Candido in a highly competitive bout. In the end, Sabu emerged victorious in a hard-fought matchup. Candido was gracious following the match, shaking the hand of Sabu to end the show. The February 24th edition of WWF Monday Night Raw was invaded by ECW, with several matches featured throughout the show. Stevie Richards of the Blue World Order defeated Little Guido of the Full-Blooded Italians. Taz defeated Mikey Whipwreck, which featured a cameo by Sabu, who fell off the R in the Raw entrance and landed on Team Taz. And Tommy Dreamer defeated Devon Dudley. Lawler mocked the ECW wrestlers all night, spouting disparaging remarks on commentary. Dangerously had enough, attacking Lawler on commentary, leading to a pull-apart brawl. The March 4th episode of ECW TV saw Raven cut a promo from the locker room, sitting on the floor. He insulted Terry Funk for not being able to finish the bout at CyberSlam. Suddenly, Funk walked in, demanding that Raven stand up and face him like a man. Raven remained seated, saying he couldn't wait to face somebody else at the pay-per-view. Funk got down in Raven's face, screaming at him for the insults. He said he can't help it if Raven's father was an idiot, nor can he help it if Raven is an idiot just like his old man. Funk said he loved his father. Raven remained silent, further riling up Funk. Despite this, Funk threatened Raven to his face, saying he'd get the last laugh. The March 10th episode of Monday Night Raw featured a bout between WWF Tag Team Champions Owen Hart and the British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith against the New Blackjacks. During the bout, ECW's Taz appeared split screen, threatening Lawler not to disparage ECW. Lawler didn't take the threat seriously, leading to Taz marching to the ring. The two got in a confrontation, with Sabu appearing and leaping over the ropes. Lawler and Taz moved, with Sabu crashing through a table. Later in the broadcast, Lawler and Paulie Dangerously participated in a debate. Dangerously came to the ring accompanied by a slew of ECW wrestlers. Jim Ross moderated the debate, which got out of control quickly. Lawler mocked ECW, saying that it didn't deserve to be seen on this grand of a stage. Dangerously defended ECW and put over how hard his wrestlers work. He went on to promote ECW's first pay-per-view, Barely Legal. Tommy Dreamer, the Sandman, the Dudley Boys, and the Eliminators got in the King's face, with Lawler retreating. The March 11th edition of ECW TV began with Joey Styles introducing Stevie Richards, who made his entrance through the crowd with the BWO. A BWO groupie ran in and made out with Richards before being escorted away by security. Raven interrupted the interview, nailing the Blue Meanie and Nova with even flows. Raven and Richards stood toe-to-toe, with Richards ready to fight. The champion, on the other hand, chose to fight another day, fleeing the scene. Taz made quick work of Spike Dudley, winning by submission with the Taz Mission. Later, fan cam footage aired of Taz burying Spike under the Team Taz flag atop a table. Sabu raced to the ring and put Spike through it, with Joey Styles on commentary saying that Sabu stole Taz's kill. A pull-apart brawl erupted between Taz and Sabu. A Pulp Fiction montage aired, beginning with Joel Gertner introducing the Dudley Boys. Bubba Ray and Devon talked trash about the Gangstas and declared their intention to challenge for the ECW Tag Team Championships. The Eliminators cut a promo inside an empty ECW arena, declaring it their home. Saturn hyped their upcoming title match against the Dudleys. Wildfire Tommy Rich claimed to be a full-blooded Italian, saying he was going to get some fine Italian cuisine at Domino's. ECW television champion the franchise Shane Douglas and Francine instigated the Pitbulls. The Pitbulls responded, saying they were out for revenge. An arrogant RVD showed no remorse for hurting Taz's shoulder. Primetime Brian Lee talked about growing up idolizing Terry Funk. Now, he can't wait to end Funk's career, and it's all on Raven's dime. Tommy Dreamer talked about the honor it is to have Terry Funk pass the torch to him. Dreamer said he'd get revenge on Raven and Lee for ending the dream of the Funker. Dreamer said, "I saw the hope in the dream leave his soul." He went on to say he'd do everything in his power to end Raven. His final words were, quote the Dreamer, "Nevermore." The March 18th episode of ECW TV began with the locker room holding RVD and Chris Candido apart. Sabu ran in to aid his partner, which brought out Taz. As Sabu and Taz stared at one another, RVD ambushed Taz. While Candido went after RVD, Sabu and Taz tried to get at one another. The locker room separated the two bitter rivals and escorted them up the aisle. Meanwhile, ECW World Heavyweight Champion Raven stared down Stevie Richards in the middle of the ring. The Gangstas' music began to play, with New Jack appearing atop the entrance. New Jack dove onto members of the locker room who'd yet to make it backstage. Taz battled RVD, with the human suplex machine throwing down a chair and begging RVD to use it. As RVD went for it, Taz wrestled him to the mat. They battled it out in a hard-hitting grudge match. RVD reintroduced the chair, kicking it in Taz's face with a Van Daminator. He followed it up by slamming the chair on Taz's chest and crashing onto him with a split-legged moonsault. Just when RVD thought he had the match won, Taz locked him in the Taz Mission. RVD put up a great fight, but passed out in the submission, with Taz declared the winner. Terry Funk made his entrance, only to be blindsided by an errant trash can thrown by his opponent, Primetime Brian Lee. The battle ensued, going out into the crowd. Funk defied both age and gravity, nailing Lee with an acai moonsault into the front row. The Funker then assaulted Lee with the trash can, pummeling him repeatedly. Funk scaled the top rope and hit a breathtaking moonsault, landing onto both a trash can and Lee. In the end, Funk dodged a primetime slam and DDT'd Lee onto a trash can to score a pinfall victory. The inspirational Funker celebrated with the fans. A vignette aired, narrated by Paul E. Dangerously, recapping an announcement Todd Gordon had made at the start of the Hostile City Showdown. We found out that the pay-per-view would be called Barely Legal. It would feature a triple threat match with the top 3 contenders for the ECW Championship. The winner would face the ECW World Champion Raven that same night. The contenders were named The Sandman, Stevie Richards, and Tommy Dreamer. However, Dreamer relinquished his spot, allowing Terry Funk to compete in his place. ECW television champion Shane Douglas battled Pitbull number 1 in an I Quit match with highlights airing. Francine handed Douglas the hammer for the ring bell. Douglas used it to clobber Pitbull number 1, re-injuring his neck. Francine loosened the top rope, with Douglas soon hitting a rude awakening. Douglas wrapped Pitbull number 1's head in the top 2 ropes, with Francine tightening the turnbuckle. Pitbull number 2 raced to the scene, only to be taken out by Candido and Brian Lee. Francine screamed at Pitbull number 1 to quit, which he soon did. Pitbull number 1 was taken out of the arena in an ambulance. Joey Styles interviewed the Masked Man, who wished Francine a happy Easter. Shortly after he left, Shane Douglas entered the scene. He talked trash about the Masked Man, whom he accused of being Rick Rude. Douglas said that Rude had a broken neck and shouldn't be around him. The franchise held a tape, which he said contained the reason why Rude can't fight. The tape contained the footage of Rude injuring his neck in Japan. Highlights aired of the Dudley Boys defeating the Eliminators with 3D to become the new ECW Tag Team Champions. The Dudley Boys cut a promo next to the train tracks, with Bubba playing taps on the harmonica to symbolize the death of the Eliminators' title reign. In the main event, Sabu battled Spike Dudley. Sabu mocked Taz, winning the bout with a Taz mission. Sabu then grabbed the microphone, breaking his silence by calling out Taz. Instead, Bill Alfonso came out and slapped Sabu across the face. Sabu snapped, attacking Alfonso and putting him through a table with a triple jump leg drop. Taz hit the ring, brawling with Sabu. The locker room emptied to separate the two as the show came to a close. The March 25th edition of ECW TV saw Terry Funk cut a promo hyping the triple threat number 1 contenders match at Barely Legal. He predicted a match with Raven for the ECW Championship. Funk closed by saying, "Bet your money on the Funker." The Great Sasuke, Gran Hamada, and Gran Naniwa battled the International Blue World Order, consisting of Taka Michinoku, Dick Togo, and Terry Boy. It was fast-paced, exciting the fans with awe-inspiring moves in a heart-racing affair. Togo attempted to unmask Sasuke, with Sasuke desperately biting down on his mask to prevent his face from being exposed. The trio of BWO members hit Sasuke with a triple powerbomb. The resilient Sasuke battled back, even sandwiching Michinoku against the stage with an Asai moonsault. Hamada nailed Toga with a Frankensteiner off the top rope, keeping the momentum on their side. Near fall after near fall, the crowd grew louder and louder. Michinoku dove off the top rope onto Sasuke on the floor, with Togo and Terry Boy nailing Naniwa with a doomsday device. Togo powerbombed Naniwa and then crushed him with a senton bomb off the top rope to score the pinfall victory. The show closed with Taz cutting a promo on Sabu, expressing his love for Sabu breaking his code of silence to call him out. He said, "Sabu, I am your limitations." Taz closed by saying, "April 13th, say goodbye to Sabu. I'm gonna kill him." The April 1st episode of ECW TV saw the ECW World Heavyweight Champion Raven cut a promo from the showers. He began by discussing Sandman's hatred for him, not worried about the possibility of him winning the three-way dance at Barely Legal. He said that he never needed Stevie Richards, and said that he didn't stand a chance. He redirected his anger towards Terry Funk, calling him too old to be champion. At that, Raven declared himself the greatest wrestler on the planet. Raven teamed with the ECW television champion, the franchise Shane Douglas, to battle Terry Funk and Tommy Dreamer. It was complete chaos, with all four brawling around the building. Primetime Brian Lee interfered, attacking Dreamer and rolling him down a set of bleachers. Funk came to Dreamer's aid, but the odds were stacked against him. Back in the ring, Raven wrenched a spinning toe hold on Funk. This brought out Stevie Richards, who leveled Raven with a Stevie kick. Funk staggered to his feet and also felt the wrath of the Stevie kick. The Sandman ran in, caning Richards and Funk before cracking open a beer. The action continued, with Francine getting involved. This brought in Beulah, with a catfight erupting. Dreamer broke it up and attempted to pile-drive Francine, only for Douglas to nail Dreamer with a belly-to-belly suplex. Douglas made the cover, but a selfish Raven shoved his partner aside, covered Dreamer, and scored the pinfall victory. The show ended with Terry Funk confronting Raven in the locker room. Funk sat on the floor, mocking Raven. The Funker stood up for himself, saying he didn't like Raven mocking him. Funk said he loved his father, loves his family, and admitted to being emotional. He pointed at Raven and called him a wimp, which riled up the champion. As Funk continued to provoke Raven, the champion kicked him repeatedly, begging the Funker to stand up. Funk remained seated, which led to a tussle between the two, bouncing one another off the lockers. The brawling continued as the show faded to black. The April 8th edition of ECW TV featured a Dudley Boys promo from a garage. Bubba Ray and Devon talked trash about the Eliminators, hyping their showdown at Barely Legal. The Eliminators responded, with Perry Saturn saying they were going to embarrass the Dudleys, defeat them with total elimination, and take back their gold. Taz cut a promo inside a wrestling ring at his dojo. He hyped his big match with Sabu at Barely Legal, begging for the old Sabu to show up for their showdown. Taz begged for Sabu to bring it all and push him to the limit. 2 years of frustration would come to a screeching halt with Taz threatening to choke out Sabu. Taz ripped the towel off his head, crawled towards the camera, and said, "Sabu, I'm gonna choke you out. See you on the 13th. Raven cut a promo discussing the #1 contenders triple threat match at Barely Legal with 3 men that despise him. He laughed at all the pain he's caused. Raven closed by saying, quote, "The world champion, nevermore." A vignette aired, narrated by and featuring Terry Funk. He walked through a field en route to his father's grave. Funk cried over his father's grave, promising him he'd be victorious at Barely Legal. Joey Styles welcomed the fans to Barely Legal, the first ever ECW pay-per-view, which took place on April 13th, live from the ECW arena. Joel Gertner interrupted, introducing the ECW Tag Team Champions, the Dudley Boys, who were backed by the silent but violent Sign Guy Dudley. Challenging for the titles were the Eliminators, who raced to the ring, with the champions retreating to the floor. Sign Guy waffled both Perry Saturn and John Kronus over the back with his wooden sign. The Eliminators were quick to take out Sign Guy with total elimination. Bubba and Devon ambushed the Eliminators, gaining a temporary advantage. It was the innovative tandem offense of the Eliminators that shifted the momentum. Saturn and Kronus jumped off opposite corners, nailing twisting stereo sentons onto the Dudleys below. Kronus assisted Saturn in moonsaulting over the top rope, crashing onto the Dudleys. Moments later, Kronus followed up with Hurricane Kronus over the top rope and onto the champions. Back in the ring, Saturn hit a breathtaking elbow drop off the top rope onto Devon below. Kronus followed with a 450 splash that brought the fans to their feet. Bubba was soon hit with total elimination, with Saturn and Kronus covering him for a pinfall victory. The Eliminators were crowned the new ECW Tag Team Champions. Gertner entered the ring, saying that the Stud Muffin scoring scale states that the Dudleys won by points. The Eliminators grabbed Gertner by the jacket and hit him with total elimination. On commentary, Joey Styles said, "Somebody call his parents. Tell him he's not coming home. Ever." The Sandman was shown backstage, smoking a cigarette and swigging a beer. He said that he was politically incorrect, and damn proud of it. Sandman hyped the 3-way dance main event, telling Terry Funk and Stevie Richards that he'd show them what's extreme. He proceeded to smash his forehead bloody with the Singapore cane. With blood streaming down his face, Sandman looked into the camera and said, "Let's dance." Chris Candido stood in the ring with his arm in a sling, unable to compete due to a partially torn bicep. Candido said that since he was here when the company started and he's been to WrestleMania, he should be in the main event. Out came the scheduled opponent of Candido, Lance Storm, who would go on to face Rob Van Dam. RVD used his lightning-quick speed to gain the advantage and soon nailed a somersault plancha over the top rope and onto Storm on the floor. Back in the ring, Storm showcased his aerial offense but missed a pescado to the floor. RVD moonsaulted off a guardrail, sending Storm crashing onto the concrete floor. Back in the ring, RVD tossed a chair at Storm, bouncing it off his face. RVD connected with a beautiful 5-star frog splash onto Storm for a 2 count. With Storm's upper torso hanging over the side of the ring, RVD crashed onto him with a slingshot guillotine leg drop. Storm got hold of the chair, with the fans criticizing him for his noticeably weak chair shots. RVD silenced the critics, smashing the chair into the face of Storm with a Van Daminator. A standing moonsault followed, with RVD scoring the pinfall victory. Following the bout, RVD grabbed the microphone, saying that he wasn't shaking Storm's hand and wasn't here for respect. With the fans chanting, "You sold out," RVD said, "I sold out to myself by putting my boots on and getting in the ring tonight after obviously being chosen as a second-line wrestler to fill in for somebody injured. RVD is no second-line anything." He focused on Storm, saying, "By beating you here, Rob Van Dam is worth more money here, and Rob Van Dam is now worth more money elsewhere." The fans were less than receptive, shouting obscenities at him. A vignette aired to hype Terry Funk, crediting him as bringing the hardcore style to North America. Paul E. Dangerously narrated, saying that Funk wanted to win a World Heavyweight Championship in a promotion that he felt he was the forefather. Dangerously said, "Can the Funker have one more night of glory at the age of 53? He said that Funk was dedicating his performance to his late father, Dory Funk Sr. Joey Styles gave the appropriate line when he said, "And now for something a little different." Japanese promotion Michinoku Pro Wrestling showcased their talent in a 6-man tag match. International Blue World Order members Taka Michinoku, Dick Togo, and Terry Boy faced the Great Sasuke, Gran Hamada, and Masato Yakushiji in a fast-paced, high-flying classic. The BWO showcased their impeccable teamwork, even hitting their signature pose while Sasuke was tied in an intricate submission in insulting fashion. The trio focused their punishment on Yakushiji next, with Togo clotheslining him back first onto the knees of Terry Boy, while Michinoku leaped off the top rope, dropping a knee onto the exposed torso of Yakushiji. The BWO planted Hamada with a spike pile driver, and then flattened Yakushiji with a triple powerbomb. They tried the same to Sasuke, stumbling and allowing him to fight his way out. Sasuke soared, crashing onto Togo with an Asai moonsault into the front row. Michinoku leaped off the top rope with a springboard plancha, taking out Hamada on the floor. Seconds later, Yakushiji pounced to the top rope, hitting Terry Boy with a missile dropkick. Terry Boy followed with a powerbomb for a 2 count. Hamada and Togo battled next, highlighted by Hamada hitting Togo with a Frankensteiner off the top rope. Yakushiji dove off the top rope, catching Togo with a Hurricanrana to send him to the floor. He then dove through the ropes like a missile, catching Togo with a suicide dive. Back in the ring, Michinoku caught Sasuke with a missile dropkick off the top rope to the back of the head. A Michinoku driver followed, with Yakushiji breaking the count. Sasuke caught Michinoku with a K-Brata, followed by a powerbomb, and finally a butterfly suplex to pick up a pinfall victory for his team. The brawling continued after the bell, with Sasuke, Hamada, and Yakushiji standing victorious. Stevie Richards cut a promo from his dressing room in front of a mirror, talking about being unpopular growing up. Now, he's in the main event of ECW's first pay-per-view, and one step closer to getting revenge on Raven. Richards said, "Win, lose, or draw, Stevie Richards will leave that ring tonight with his respect." The Blue Meanie as the Blue Guy burst in, hyping up Richards and saying he'll be victorious. The ECW television champion, the franchise Shane Douglas, came to the ring accompanied by Francine and protected by a riot squad. Douglas cut a promo, crediting himself for leading ECW to the promised land known as pay-per-view. Pitbull number 1 Gary Wolf sat in the front row, listening to Douglas rant about his accomplishments. Out came Douglas's challenger, Pitbull number 2, who overpowered the champion to gain the advantage. Douglas battled back and planted Pitbull number 2 with 3 pile drivers in a row. He then locked Pitbull number 2 in a camel clutch, further damaging the neck. Pitbull number 2 battled back, hitting Douglas with a fall-away slam over the top rope and through the timekeeper's table. Pitbull number 1 hopped the guardrail, attacking Douglas until he was dragged away by the riot squad. Meanwhile, Pitbull number 2 tossed a guardrail into the ring, which Douglas used to his advantage. Douglas tossed the guardrail over the top rope and across the back of Pitbull number 2 on the floor. Back in the ring, Pitbull number 2 got his second wind, slamming Douglas around the ring. Francine handed Douglas a pair of brass knuckles, which he used to bash Pitbull number 2 in the face. Douglas grabbed a piece of a table, shattering it over the head of Pitbull number 2. The franchise used a steel chair and the ring bell to bash Pitbull number 2, who kept kicking out of pinfall attempts. Douglas battered Pitbull number 2 repeatedly with the television championship, but Pitbull number 2 refused to stay down. Pitbull number 2 retrieved a steel chain from Douglas's boot, wrapping it around his wrist and punching the champion in the face. Chris Candido raced to the ring, with Pitbull number 2 knocking him off the apron. Francine distracted Pitbull number 2, allowing Douglas to roll him up for a 2 count. Douglas ducked a clothesline and planted Pitbull number 2 with a belly-to-belly suplex to score the pinfall victory. We heard a familiar voice who said that Douglas better give up the girl or pay the consequences. The masked man sauntered down the aisle, wearing the legendary blue velvet robe with "Simply Ravishing" written across the back. Douglas shoved Francine towards the masked man, who planted a passionate kiss on her. From behind, Douglas bounced the television title off the back of the masked man's head. A Riot Squad member threw down his helmet, revealing himself to be Ravishing Rick Rude. Douglas ripped the mask off the masked man to reveal Primetime Brian Lee. Rude bashed Douglas in the stomach with a nightstick, with Lee choke-slamming the franchise. The fans went wild, with Candido helping Douglas away while Francine gazed into the ring. An angry Douglas dragged her away by the wrist, while Rude and Lee soaked in the adulation of the fans. The ECW World Heavyweight Champion Raven cut a promo from a staircase, saying that 10% of the fans in the crowd were martyrs like him. Raven stood to his feet, extended his arms, and said, "Nevermore." With Bill Alfonso by his side, Taz cut a promo from a dark room, hyping his upcoming match against Sabu. Taz said, "You, in a few short moments, are going to go through hell. And I know you're going to put me through hell too. And I love it." He said, "I'm gonna bust you up." Taz said, "One last thing, Sabu. If I was you, I wouldn't be." Bob Ortiz made the ring announcements for the grudge match of the century. Bill Alfonso and Team Taz led the human suplex machine Taz to the ring. Sabu didn't wait for his theme music, racing to the ring ready for action. Taz and Sabu stood nose to nose in the ring, with Taz slapping Sabu across the face. Sabu struck back, and the action commenced, with Taz attempting to put on the Taz mission early on. While Sabu countered a submission, Taz latched onto his back, striking him repeatedly with vicious crossfaces. It wasn't long before Sabu's nose was broken and bloody. Moments later, Sabu hit a double jump springboard plancha into the third row, landing on Taz. They brawled through the arena, with Sabu missing a dive and landing ribs first onto a guardrail. Back in the ring, Sabu tossed a chair at the face of Taz, vaulting off a chair to hit Air Sabu. He tried again, with Taz catching Sabu and dropping him face first on a steel chair. Still, Sabu bounced back and launched himself off a chair and the top rope to jump on Taz, who moved, with Sabu smashing onto a steel guardrail. Taz grabbed Sabu, hitting him with a belly-to-belly suplex into the front row. Sabu recovered and laid Taz on a table that was bridged across the ring and a guardrail. Taz rose to his feet, with Sabu attempting a swinging DDT. It failed, as Taz held onto the top rope and Sabu crashed through the table below. Back in the ring, Sabu hit Taz with a Frankensteiner off the top rope for a 2 count. Sabu launched himself off the top rope, nailing Taz with a big leg drop. Shortly after, Taz nailed a head and arm Tazplex, dropping Sabu onto his head. Sabu nailed a T-bone Tazplex of his own and locked in his version of the Taz mission. Taz reversed it and then planted Sabu with a belly-to-back Tazplex. A T-bone Tazplex followed, with Taz then locking in the Taz mission. The referee checked the arm of Sabu, which went limp, giving Taz the victory. Following the match, Taz got on the microphone, thanking Sabu for giving him the fight of his life. Taz extended his hand to Sabu, who accepted. In a surreal scene, Sabu raised Taz's arm, with the crowd giving them a standing ovation. They even hugged. Rob Van Dam raced in, ambushing Taz and scolding Sabu. Taz snuck behind RVD, looking for a Taz mission. Sabu punched Taz in the face and joined RVD in the beatdown. RVD laid Taz out on a table bridge across the ring and a guardrail. Sabu dove over the top rope, putting Taz through the table. To add insult to injury, Sabu locked Taz in a Taz mission on the floor. Fonzie confronted RVD and Sabu, taking his Team Taz shirt off to reveal a Sabu shirt. He raised the arms of RVD and Sabu, revealing that he double-crossed Taz. RVD got on the microphone, telling wrestling promoters to get in touch with his new manager, Bill Alfonso. He then said, "I love to work Mondays." From the broadcast position, Joey Styles introduced the innovator of violence, Tommy Dreamer, and Beulah McGillicuddy. Dreamer would provide commentary for the three-way dance main event, partial towards his mentor, Terry Funk. The match featured Stevie Richards, the Sandman, and Funk, with the winner getting an immediate ECW World Heavyweight Championship match against Raven. Funk received a standing ovation during his introduction, with Sandman offering him a beer at the bell. With Funk declining, Sandman chugged the beer and spit it in the face of Richards. After battling back and forth, the Sandman retreated to the locker room. He returned with a ladder, tossing it into the ring and bouncing it off of Funk. Sandman then suplexed the ladder onto Richards before waffling Funk over the head with it. Funk battled Sandman atop the ladder and then moonsaulted onto Richards below. With the ladder in hand, Sandman dove off the top rope, smashing the ladder onto Richards below. Richards Stevie kicked the ladder into the face of Sandman for a quick cover and 2 count. Sandman attempted an Irish whip, with Richards reversing it to send Sandman crashing against the ladder. Richards and Sandman began brawling atop the ladder, with Funk toppling it over. Funk held the ladder over his shoulders, spinning around repeatedly and whacking both Sandman and Richards in the face. Both Funk and Sandman brawled over a ladder that was leaning against the top rope. Richards dove off the top rope and onto the top of the ladder, which catapulted into the face of both Funk and Sandman. He nailed Sandman and Funk each with Stevie kicks, only getting 2 counts on each. Sandman threw Richards to the floor and into the front row. He set the ladder up in the crowd and then dove over the top rope, catapulting the ladder into the face of Richards. Sandman left the scene again, returning with a metal garbage can wrapped in sheet metal. He tossed it into the ring, bouncing it off the head of Funk with a sickening thud. A wary Funk assisted Sandman in suplexing Richards onto the trash can, smashing it. The Funker lifted Richards for a pile driver, with Sandman jumping off the second rope to spike Richards. Sandman buried Richards under a ladder and hit him with a somersault senton, only scoring a 2 count. Funk lifted Richards for a powerbomb, with Sandman providing extra force in slamming him to the mat. Both men covered Richards for a 3 count, resulting in the first elimination. Sandman pulled a length of barbed wire out from under the ring, which Funk got a hold of. Funk exposed Sandman's bare back and began whipping it with barbed wire. Sandman fought through the pain, wrapping himself in barbed wire and ramming into Funk repeatedly like a battering ram. Funk put the trash can over Sandman's head, with Richards connecting with a Stevie kick. After moonsaulting off the top rope, Funk landed on Sandman and scored the pinfall victory. Raven wasted no time, racing to the ring and clobbering Funk over the head with the ECW Heavyweight Championship. He then hit Funk with a drop toe hold onto a steel chair in the middle of the ring. A large gash opened on Funk's head, pouring out blood to cover his face and torso. Referee John Finnegan called Dr. Mark Allen, but Raven continued his beatdown. Raven set up a table on the floor, putting Funk through it with a running splash over the top rope. The referee wanted to stop the match, but Raven shoved him aside and waved on his nest of cronies. International Women's Wrestling star Reggie Bennett entered the ring, nailing Funk with a Tiger Bomb. Raven grabbed the microphone, saying, "Tommy Dreamer, I'm gonna put Funk through 3 tables. I'm gonna end his comeback, his career, and it's gonna be right in front of your feet." Dreamer threw down his headset and jumped to his feet in anger, only to be ambushed by Big Dick Dudley, who smashed his head with a trash can. While Raven's cronies stacked 3 tables below, Big Dick prepared Dreamer for a chokeslam. Dreamer kicked him low, hitting a chokeslam of his own to send Dick flying off the balcony and crashing through the 3 tables below. This earned an "Oh my God" from Joey Styles. Dreamer raced to the ring, planting Raven with a DDT. Funk covered Raven, only getting a 2 count despite the bell ringing. The match continued, with Funk rolling up Raven with a small package for a pinfall victory. Terry Funk was crowned the new ECW World Heavyweight Champion in an emotional moment. Dreamer celebrated with a bloody Funk in the crowd, with the new champion leading the fans in the chant of "Our Way." Funk trudged through the front row, with the fans congratulating him. Infamously, the power went out in the arena only seconds after the conclusion of this monumental event. The April 15th edition of ECW TV began with footage of Terry Funk delivering a speech at a banquet held in his honor the night before Barely Legal. He held the attention of the room, with everyone hanging on his every word. Funk praised the dedication of the locker room, who no doubt respected him tenfold. Taz cut a promo, saying he did exactly what he said he was going to do: choke out Sabu. He recounted the beatdown that followed after his match with Sabu, calling out RVD and Bill Alfonso for their actions. Taz said he never needed Alfonso and no longer needs anyone, except for Sabu. Taz said that Sabu is his fuel. ECW television champion, the franchise Shane Douglas, cut a promo on the April 22nd edition of ECW TV. With Francine by his side, Douglas called Ravishing Rick Rude a shell of his former self. Raven cut a promo from a shower stall, saying he has nothing left to live for. Now, he feels his new purpose is to take out the new ECW champion, Terry Funk. Raven asked Stevie Richards to join him on this mission, saying all is forgiven. Stevie Richards responded, saying he'll never forgive Raven. Chris Candido appeared backstage with his arm in a sling, complaining to his girlfriend, WWF superstar Sunny. Meanwhile, Rob Van Dam entered, walking behind the bickering couple and pinching Sunny on her butt. Candido snapped, attacking RVD. The locker room emptied to hold Candido back, while RVD snuck away, laughing. The April 29th episode of ECW TV saw Bill Alfonso hype his team of Sabu and Rob Van Dam. He put the entire tag team division on notice before voicing his disgust for Taz. RVD calmed Fonzie down and then used the TV time to promote himself and try to get a job on Monday nights. This angered Sabu, whom RVD assured he'll still team with. In the final segment of the show, Raven bragged about dealing with more anguish than any man ever has. He said he was sick of the hurting and invited his haters to join him. Raven snapped, barging into the dressing room of Stevie Richards. He told Richards that he had one final mission, to take him out and end his pain. After attacking Richards, Raven cradled him, whispering for him to end his pain. The May 6th edition of ECW TV emanated from Asbury Park, with hometown hero Bam Bam Bigelow sitting in the front row. ECW television champion, the franchise Shane Douglas, confronted Bigelow with a verbal tirade, creating an uncomfortable scene. Joey Styles introduced his new co-host, Ravishing Rick Rude. He said he'd add his own kind of rude color to the ECW commentary. In the main event, Shane Douglas defended the ECW television title against Balls Mahoney. Chris Candido interfered, ambushing Mahoney. Bigelow hopped the guardrail, standing side by side with Mahoney. The allegiance was brief, with Bigelow turning on Mahoney and joining the triple threat. The Pitbulls raced to the ring, quickly disposing of Douglas and Candido. Meanwhile, Bigelow stared down the Pitbulls as the broadcast went off the air. Lawler wouldn't fire another shot at ECW until the May 12th episode of Raw is War. He introduced his latest associate, ECW's Mr. Monday Night, Rob Van Dam. Lawler claimed that RVD was the only true talent in ECW. RVD bashed ECW, calling it a promotion full of wannabes. RVD would go on to compete against enhancement talent Jeff Hardy. The two had a competitive bout, with RVD picking up a win after a split-legged moonsault. The May 13th episode of ECW TV saw Tommy Dreamer battle Louis Spicoli, who came to the ring dressed up as the Innovator of Violence. Spicoli battered Dreamer around ringside, busting him open in the early minutes. Dreamer battled back, tying Spicoli in a tree of woe, balancing a steel chair on his face, and running across the ring with a big dropkick to kick the chair into Spicoli's face. This rendered Spicoli a bloody mess, with Dreamer pummeling him more in the crowd. They battled back in the ring, with Spicoli's pants torn to shreds. After more brawling, Dreamer hit an enziguri and scored the pinfall victory. But Spicoli wasn't finished, ambushing Dreamer and planting Beulah with a Death Valley driver. Members of the locker room and officials rushed to the ring to attend to Beulah, with Dreamer an emotional wreck. In the main event, Chris Candido defeated Rob Van Dam with a German suplex. Following the bout, RVD lambasted the fans, saying that he deserves to be wrestling in bigger buildings in front of better fans. The May 19th episode of Raw is War saw Jerry Lawler claim that Paulie Dangerously took legal action against him. This meant that RVD could no longer appear on WWF TV. The May 20th edition of ECW TV featured a Pulp Fiction montage, with the Locker Room discussing Rob Van Dam's recent debut on Monday Night Raw. Raven discussed the trend of the 90s being to sell out to corporate America. The Sandman said he'd become sober just to get RVD in the ring for 5 minutes. ECW World Heavyweight Champion Terry Funk said that RVD gave up his freedom and will just get lost in the shuffle. ECW Television Champion The Franchise Shane Douglas said, "If they can't have me, I guess they can have you." Louis Spicolli threw up the Wolfpack symbol and said, "Say hi to Sean and Hunter for me." Tommy Dreamer said that the WWF would kill RVD slowly. He said that RVD broke the cardinal rule, don't sell out. The Dudleys voiced their disgust, with Bubba saying, "If you wanted to be surrounded by pieces of crap, you could have just stayed here." The FBI sat on exercise bikes, with Tommy Rich asking if they were talking about Jean-Claude Van Damme. Francine said she's done a lot of things for money, but she'd never do what RVD did. ECW Commissioner Todd Gordon suspended RVD indefinitely. In the main event, Tommy Dreamer chose the ECW World Heavyweight Champion Terry Funk as his dream tag team partner. Beulah stood in their corner, sporting a neck brace. Raven chose Stevie Richards, who took a beating at the hands of Dreamer and the Funker. Raven refused to tag in, yet criticized Richards over the microphone to fight like a man. The action got out of hand, with Raven putting Funk through a table. Funk battled back, battering Raven in the crowd with a chair, while Dreamer pummeled Richards. The action returned to the ring, where Raven battered Funk with the broken table. Raven planted the champion with an even flow before wrenching in a spinning toe hold. Dreamer attacked Raven, with Richards locking Funk in another spinning toe hold. Raven returned to shove Richards, saying that he wanted to be the one to pin Funk. Richards responded by shoving Raven, only for Raven to plant him with an even flow. Raven locked his spinning toe hold back in on Funk, with Dreamer breaking it up. The referee got knocked out in the melee, with nobody to count Dreamer's pin attempt on Raven. Louis Spicolli interfered, wearing a Beulah t-shirt, and attacked Dreamer. Funk returned to fight Spicolli, who hoisted him up for a Death Valley driver. Richards broke up the attempt by nailing Spicolli with a Stevie kick. The opportunity was ripe for the picking, with Richards covering Funk and scoring the pinfall victory. The May 27th episode of ECW TV saw Stevie Richards cut a promo discussing his humble beginnings and his burning desire to be a superstar. He discussed suffering through Raven's abuse and wanting to leave that in the past. Richards then challenged Terry Funk to face him for the ECW World Heavyweight Championship. He said he has so much admiration for Funk, but said he would unleash pain on the Funker to become the champion. Afterward, the BWO was shown cutting a promo in the showers. The Blue Meanie said that Richards was leaving them behind. In the main event, the Sandman answered the open challenge of Balls Mahoney. It was a duel of the Singapore cane and the steel chair, with both taking brutal shots. The Dudleys interfered, attacking Mahoney, only for Sandman to save his opponent. Big Dick Dudley gave the Dudleys the advantage, allowing Bubba and Devon to nail Sandman with 3D. Meanwhile, Big Dick planted Mahoney with a chokeslam. Tommy Dreamer raced to the ring, with Spicoli attacking him from behind. Terry Funk ran in, attacking Spicoli. Stevie Richards hit the ring, with Funk peppering him with right hands. Richards responded by knocking out Funk with a Stevie kick. The June 3rd edition of ECW TV began with Joey Styles announcing that an injury to Stevie Richards would prevent him from competing at WrestlePalooza. Chris Candido cut a promo in front of the ECW banner, gloating that he'll now be getting the shot at the ECW World Heavyweight Championship. Candido claimed to have a history of anger towards Funk, since he was a kid and saw the Funker beat up his uncle, Popeye Chuck Richards. He claimed that he should be the World Heavyweight Champion, but Funk took that shot from him by competing at Barely Legal. Candido was confident, calling Funk old and broken down, and said that he'd leave the ECW arena as the World Heavyweight Champion. Taz cut a promo from a dark room, hyping his upcoming match against Sabu at WrestlePalooza. He threatened to choke out both Sabu and Bill Alfonso for swerving him. Taz said, "Sabu, the point now is me hurting you. The point now is me busting you up." He said, "You ain't got no respect, you ain't got no loyalty, and after Saturday night, you ain't gonna have no breath, 'cause I'm choking you out. I guarantee it." WrestlePalooza 97 took place on June 7th, and saw Terry Funk defend the ECW World Heavyweight Championship against Chris Candido. Playing mind games, Candido dressed in gear similar to Funk's. An injured Stevie Richards interrupted, cutting a passionate promo about his neck injury. Richards said that he may never wrestle again. He wished Funk luck, and then hugged him in an emotional moment. After mat wrestling back and forth, Funk and Candido took the fight into the crowd. Candido pile drove Funk onto a steel chair, and then tried to pile drive him on top of the timekeeper's table, with the table collapsing beneath them. Back in the ring, Candido spiked Funk repeatedly with pile drivers, with the champion kicking out of a pinfall attempt. Candido stuck with repetition, hitting Funk with a trio of Hangman's neckbreakers. He then hit Funk with a neckbreaker onto a pile of chairs, with the champion again kicking out. Funk fought back, and caught Candido with a rolling cradle, scoring the pinfall victory out of nowhere to retain his championship. Rob Van Dam returned to WWF Raw is War on June 9th, appearing in a backstage promo with Jerry the King Lawler. Lawler threatened ECW if they tried to interfere in RVD's match tonight. RVD made his entrance with Lawler by his side. Paulie Dangerously and Tommy Dreamer were seated in the front row and became irate at the sight of the anti-ECW contingency. RVD went on to face Flash Funk in an entertaining, high-flying bout. The match ended with RVD hitting a split-legged moonsault onto Funk for the victory. Dangerously and Dreamer hopped the guardrail and attacked Lawler and RVD, leading to a huge pull-apart brawl at ringside. The June 10th episode of ECW TV featured footage from WrestlePalooza 97 from the ECW arena. It featured the final appearance of Raven, who would be leaving for WCW. He made his way to the ring with Chastity and his new lackey, Lupus. Raven's opponent for his final ECW match would be his arch enemy, the innovator of violence, Tommy Dreamer, who was accompanied by Beulah. Before the bell, Lupus suggested that Raven run, which he did, heading for the front door. Dreamer followed him into the parking lot, bouncing Raven's head off the steel loading dock door. Back in the arena, Dreamer battered Raven through the crowd and around the building. Raven tossed Dreamer off the bleachers and crashing through a table on the concrete floor. They battled to the stage, where Raven suplexed a table onto Dreamer before tossing him through it. Raven set up a second table and attempted a suplex, only for Dreamer to reverse it with a backdrop. Dreamer set Raven onto a table, attempting a big splash. Raven moved, with Dreamer crashing through the table. They brawled down the aisle, bloodying one another until Dreamer dragged Raven back through the crowd and Irish whipped him against a vending machine. Dreamer tried dragging Raven up to the Eagle's Nest, only for Raven to strike him with a low blow and toss him on top of the vending machine. They battled back to the ring, where Raven hit a drop toe hold on Dreamer, face first onto a steel chair. Raven tossed Dreamer off the top rope and crashing onto a chair set up on the mat. Dreamer battled back and clobbered Raven with a metal street sign disguised as a fan sign. Amongst the madness, the referee was knocked out, getting caught in the crossfire. Dreamer spiked Raven with a pile driver, with a weary referee making the count and Lupus breaking up the attempt. Beulah took out Lupus with a DDT and then posed with Dreamer. Raven rolled up Dreamer for a 2 count. He then grabbed Beulah by the hand, begging her to take him back. This allowed Dreamer to roll up Raven, who kicked out after 2. Chastity sprayed Dreamer in the eyes with hairspray, with Raven rolling him up, but only for 2. Beulah and Chastity engaged in a catfight, with Raven breaking it up and attempting to reconcile with Beulah. She wanted nothing of it, striking Raven with a low blow, allowing Dreamer to DDT him onto a street sign. The referee made the count, with the crowd counting along and Raven barely kicking out. Dreamer and Raven accidentally knocked out the referee once again. While Dreamer planted Raven with another DDT, the referee remained unconscious. Louis Spicoli raced in, ambushing Dreamer and hitting a DDT. Spicoli tossed Raven onto Dreamer and woke up the referee. The referee made the count, with Dreamer barely kicking out. Spicoli hoisted Dreamer up for a Death Valley driver, with Dreamer wiggling free and hitting a DDT. Raven spiked Dreamer with an even flow, but only got a 2 count. Dreamer nailed his own DVD on Raven before dragging him up for one more maneuver. Raising his fist in the air, Dreamer yelled, "ECFNW," before striking Raven with a big DDT onto the street sign. The referee made the count, with Dreamer finally scoring a pinfall victory over Raven. Dreamer cried as he was announced the winner, and the fans chanted ECW. But the celebration was cut short as the lights went out, flashing back on to reveal Rob Van Dam. RVD tossed a chair at Dreamer and hit a Van Daminator to kick off a brawl. Just as Dreamer gained the advantage, the lights flashed off and back on to reveal Sabu, who tossed a second chair at the head of Dreamer. Again, Dreamer gained the advantage, only for the lights to go out. The crowd vehemently booed as the lights flashed back on to reveal known ECW detractor, current WWF superstar, and Memphis wrestling legend, Jerry the King Lawler. Dreamer lunged at Lawler, with RVD and Sabu holding him back. As Spicoli restrained Beulah in the corner, members of the locker room raced to the ring. RVD and Sabu fended everyone off with chairs, while Lawler barked at the fans over the microphone. Lawler said, "This bingo hall ought to be built out of toilet paper, 'cause there's nothing in it but shit." Bill Alfonso joined in, urging the franchise Shane Douglas to try and stop them. Sitting on the soundstage, Douglas said that he didn't want any part of it. Lawler referred to ECW as extremely crappy wrestling and said that they didn't have anybody tough enough to stop them. Dreamer temporarily took down Lawler, with RVD and Sabu making the save. The Sandman came in, striking Sabu repeatedly with the Singapore cane. RVD made the save and struck Sandman with a Van Daminator. Lawler led the assault on Dreamer as Alfonso provoked the locker room and the fans chanted for Taz. After Lawler asked, "Is that all you got?" Kiss's War Machine blasted through the speakers, with Taz making his entrance to a huge ovation. As Taz entered the ring, Lawler, RVD, Sabu, and Alfonso made a quick exit. Shane Douglas provoked Taz over the microphone, which only angered the human suplex machine further. As medics attended to the mass amount of injured bodies, Taz called out Sabu. The match began with Sabu slugging Taz in the jaw, kicking off a brutal battle between the two. Sabu hit an Acai moonsault onto Taz on the floor, but crotched himself on the top rope after a triple jump moonsault attempt. Taz planted Sabu with a T-bone Tazplex, hitting a Northern Lights Tazplex soon after for a 2 count. Launching off the top rope, Taz missed a somersault, crashing to the mat and allowing Sabu to hit a leg drop off the top rope. Sabu laid Taz onto a table, putting him through it with a splash off the top rope. Taz was quick to recover, sitting up and locking Sabu in the Taz mission. With the hold still locked in, Sabu rolled backward over Taz, pinning his shoulders to the mat for a pinfall victory. Despite this, Taz refused to break the hold, leading to a slew of officials racing to the ring. An angry Taz began to attack the officials and then locked Bill Alfonso in a Taz mission. An irritated ECW television champion, the franchise Shane Douglas, voiced his disgust from the balcony. Taz challenged Douglas to face him in the ring, saying he could beat him in 5 minutes or less. Douglas laughed at the claim, saying he'd put his title on the line if Taz could beat him in 3 minutes or less. However, if Taz couldn't win in the set time, he'd leave the company for 45 days. Taz accepted, with Douglas making his way to the ring for the 3-minute challenge. Douglas gained an early advantage, attacking the neck of Taz. A misstep by Douglas led to Taz locking in the Taz mission. With 1 minute counting down, Douglas tried desperately to make it to the ropes. With 15 seconds left, Douglas kicked off the ropes, only for Taz to wrap his legs around him and stretch him back. Douglas tapped, with Taz crowned the new ECW television champion. Tommy Dreamer invaded USWA TV on June 14th, with security holding him back as he charged towards the ring in pursuit of Jerry the King Lawler. Dreamer fought off security and flipped the broadcast desk in a tense scene. He tossed around garbage cans and threw a bench into the ring. Officials attempted to maintain order, with Dreamer fighting them all off. Dreamer hit a referee with a pile driver onto the concrete floor and used a steel chair to bash Elliot Pollock over the head. On the June 16th edition of Raw is War, Too Sexy Brian Christopher faced ECW's Chris Candido. Paulie Dangerously appeared on commentary, continuing to promote his wrestlers. He added fuel to the fire, revealing that Christopher was Lawler's son. Lawler marched to the ring and attacked Candido to cause a disqualification. RVD ran in to aid in the beatdown. Tommy Dreamer ran in with a chair to clear the ring. Later in the broadcast, RVD and Lawler faced the Headbangers in the first round of the WWF Tag Team Championship Tournament. Seething from the crowd were Paulie Dangerously and Tommy Dreamer. With the referee distracted, the Sandman ran in through the crowd and hit Lawler below the bell with a Singapore cane. This allowed the Headbangers to pick up the win. RVD jumped the guardrail and brawled with Sandman and Dreamer. A riled-up Dangerously held his wrestlers back, with officials escorting RVD to the back. The June 17th episode of ECW TV featured a promo from Tommy Dreamer, who was getting the back of his head stitched up after the events that transpired at WrestlePalooza. Dreamer said that after defeating Raven, he now has something to live for. He predicted a harsh future for Jerry the King Lawler, Sabu, and Rob Van Dam. Backstage, Jerry the King Lawler said that he was going to shoot on Paulie Dangerously. He insulted the locker room and the fans, saying he doesn't understand why the fans are chanting "You sold out" at RVD and Sabu. Lawler said that all Dangerously has to do is ask, and Lawler can get him a meeting with Vince McMahon. He said that Dangerously is jealous of the WWF success, with the King calling him a nobody. Lawler dared the ECW roster to face him, insulting them all one at a time. The new ECW television champion Taz cut a promo from a dark room lit only by an orange light. Taz bragged about defeating the franchise Shane Douglas in under 3 minutes. He hyped the aggressiveness of the locker room and downplayed the accomplishments of Jerry Lawler. Taz criticized RVD and Sabu for wanting to leave and said that Vince McMahon will never get him. He said he's not a company player and he only cares about himself. Taz dared anybody to challenge him for his newly won title. He said, "Beat me if you can, survive if I let you." The Dudley Boys stood in the ring, backed by Big Dick Dudley and Joel Gertner. ECW Commissioner Todd Gordon announced that Perry Saturn had suffered a torn ACL and broken tibia and is expected to be out for 1 year. The Eliminators came to the ring with Saturn on crutches and handed the ECW Tag Team titles over to Gordon. Saturn said that they should only lose the titles in a fight, with Gordon saying he was in no position to fight. John Kronus said he'd take on both Dudleys by himself, with Gordon ordering the bell to be rung. Both Bubba Ray and Devon battered Kronus, with Big Dick Dudley joining in on the beatdown. Saturn began swinging one of his crutches to subdue the monster, and then nailed an ace crusher on Bubba. Kronus gained his second wind, taking out the three Dudleys as well as the referee. With Devon wary on the mat, Kronus connected with a 450 splash off the top rope. Saturn hit an elbow drop off the top rope onto Devon, with the referee making the 3 count. The Eliminators remain the ECW Tag Team Champions. The June 23rd episode of Raw is War saw Sabu face Flash Funk. Paulie Dangerously appeared on commentary to hype Sabu as the most dangerous man in wrestling. Sabu wasted no time setting up a table at ringside. The match featured a display of high-risk maneuvers, dazzling the crowd. Ultimately, the bout ended in a double disqualification. After 3 attempts, Sabu hit a leg drop off the top rope onto Funk through the table. The entire ECW storyline quietly disappeared from WWF television shortly after. The June 24th episode of ECW TV began with John Kronus defending the ECW Tag Team Championships against the Dudley Boys. If Perry Saturn attempted to compete injured, the Athletic Commission threatened to shut down the show. With Big Dick Dudley aiding his brothers, Kronus was soon rendered a bloody mess. Bubba and Devon hit the 3D and pinned Kronus to become 2-time ECW World Tag Team Champions. Jerry the King Lawler cut a promo in front of a WWF backdrop, mocking the ECW arena by calling it a bingo hall. Lawler said that there were only 2 true athletes in the ECW locker room, Rob Van Dam and Sabu. He accused Paulie Dangerously of falsely advertising him to appear at the next ECW arena show, with Lawler saying, "Once is enough for the King." In the main event, Tommy Dreamer battled Louis Spicolli in an I Quit match. Before the start, Dreamer was laid out by Rob Van Dam and Sabu. This allowed Spicolli to gain the early advantage, pummeling Dreamer with a microphone in an attempt to get him to quit. Spicolli brought the pieces of the Timekeeper's table into the ring, using them to bash Dreamer. Beulah handed Dreamer a pair of pliers, which he used to squeeze the testicles of Spicolli. In a high-pitched squeal, Spicolli said, "I quit," with Dreamer declared the winner. What was next for Tommy Dreamer in his war against Jerry the King Lawler and his WWF coalition? Find out next time on Squared Circle History.